We're up here on the Utah-Idaho border on the Idaho side, west of Bear Lake, looking into some Bigfoot sightings. The area is rich with Bigfoot sightings, a great history of them. We're in an area where a guy had some vocalizations and Bigfoot activity by two creatures in June of 2003. This area is about 6,000 feet elevation with a creek. It's full of fish and there's a lot of freshwater springs around here. The place is well known for bears, so I have no doubt that there's enough habitat, enough food for a large creature like a Bigfoot. There's also moose, elk, and deer. I'm going to go ahead and go over the Bigfoot sighting report that the guy had. It was actual vocalizations, and he'd seen the silhouette of the creatures from his fire that was going that night. Here's his report. I was playing with my dogs about 200 feet from the campfire right before sunset. I heard a weird sound behind me, pretty far up the mountain. I thought I was just imagining it and kept playing with the dogs. After 10 minutes, I heard it again, along with the second call, further up the canyon. I thought that I had imagined it. Another 5 or 10 minutes went by, and I knew the third time that I had heard it. It was very loud, sharp call, very much like what a primate sounds like, from what I have seen on TV. I was instantly on edge, as I have camped, hiked in this area many times over 10 to 12 years, without any previous incidents of these sounds. I went back to my campfire to start dinner when I heard it again. This time my dogs took notice, and they were very uneasy as well. After 2 or 3 more instances, with my 3 dogs cowering at my feet, I decided to respond. Immediately there was a call and reply that sounded agitated. They proceeded to call back and forth, progressively getting closer to my location. It was getting dark. I got in the back of my SUV with my dogs to try to relax and think. And then I heard sounds very close to the trees not far from me. The dogs went from terrified to attack mode, barking and jumping back and forth to the side windows, and I realized the sunroof was open. I panicked, jumped over the seat, and started the vehicle and jetted out of there. All this happened in about an hour or so. My dogs had seen many animals in the hills before, and nothing ever seemed to frighten them. There was a follow-up investigation by my friend Todd Strong. He did the original BFRO investigation. He talked to the witness on the phone, and Todd has camped in the area many times himself. He found him believable, experienced in the outdoors, and familiar with his dogs. He still seemed a little scared, and after interviewing, he can add the following to the account. The witness went camping with his 3 dogs, something he often does, and had been playing with the dogs in an undeveloped campsite for about 2 hours. He heard a strange vocalization up the mountain he had never heard before. Then a second, similar vocalization respond. Not knowing what they were and realizing that they were long ways away, he tried to mimic the vocalization himself. Both animals responded and started moving down the mountain in his direction, calling and vocalizing to each other. The closer the vocalizations got, the more scared his dogs became, until he took the dogs into the vehicle with him. Shortly after locking themselves in the vehicle, the dogs became totally petrified and began growling, barking, and snapping at the windows, leading him to believe the 2 animals were at least inside the campground and possibly right outside his vehicle. He decided to leave at that point. The witness explained his 3 dogs have never been scared before, and have even ran in between the legs of moose and elk while in the mountains. The best way the witness could describe the sound was like a chimpanzee sound he had heard on nature shows, only deeper and not as quite high-pitched. It was the first time he had ever heard an animal make that kind of noise. I am aware of other reports in this general area of loud vocalizations and believe that detail. The animals approaching the campground after witness vocalized and the reaction of the dogs to be typical behavior. He told a professor at the Utah State about the noise, and the professor showed him the BFRO website and suggested he send in a report. The professor said he and a friend saw something the year before in the same area, walking on two legs through a clearing that they thought may have been a Bigfoot. This is Kelly Shaw reporting for the Rocky Mountain Sasquatch organization at the location, as close as I could get to the location from the description of this Bigfoot experience. I Bigfoot in this area a lot because there are so many Bigfoot sightings in this general area. I had a vocalization experience in 2011 that was pretty eerie. 2 nights in a row when we were camping right here on Beaver Creek. We were actually about 2 or 3 miles from this location where the gentleman had his experience. What we heard, it sounded like a woman screaming in distress. Although I know a woman cannot make the sound that I was hearing. It was much deeper, and the scream lasted so much longer than what I think even an opera singer could do. You know what I mean? This thing had some lungs, belted it out for, I don't know, 12, 15 seconds, maybe longer. The first night we heard 2 vocalizations like that, about 1 in the morning, and then nothing the rest of the night. And then the next night it happened again. Pretty creepy. We never did end up identifying the creature that did it. However, after the first night, the next morning we did find a footprint inside the creek. It was under about 4 inches of water, but the footprint was just crystal clear. I'll put that at the end of this video. It's a quite interesting footprint that we found in the mud. It was pretty crisp around the toes and between the toes and the foot and everything. So I know it couldn't have been too old, but it was old enough that whatever mud or debris had been disturbed had settled down because the water was crystal clear and we could see the footprint bright as day. I'll add that to this. But anyway, this is a great Bigfoot sighting location. We love Bigfoot in here. We've heard the vocalizations ourselves that this guy is describing. I hope you enjoyed this video. Keep on watching. We're gonna keep on squatching.
The old hunters in northern British Columbia have one rule about Bigfoot, and it is not the rule you would expect. They do not tell you to run. They do not tell you to shoot. They tell you this: never let it know that you have seen it. Because the moment it understands that you are aware of it, everything changes. It stops hiding. It starts following. And it will wait, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, until the one single moment when your hands are full and your rifle is not. On the morning of October 18, 2024, a 28-year-old paramedic named Jim Barnes drove into the bush outside Chetwynd, British Columbia, with his golden retriever in the passenger seat and a loaded firearm in the truck. He was seen alive at around 11 in the morning. Roughly 3 hours later, his truck was sitting on a Forest Service road with the keys still inside, the phone still inside, the wallet still inside, and the rifle still inside. Jim was gone. The dog was gone, and in the snow around that truck, there was nothing. No struggle, no blood, no drag marks, nothing. That was almost 2 years ago. To this day, not one bone, not one boot, not one scrap of clothing belonging to Jim Barnes has ever been recovered. And what happened 5 weeks later, 100 kilometers away, is the single strangest twist in this entire case. It made national news. It gave a family hope. And then a laboratory took that hope away. Stay with me, because I am going to show you exactly what the police found, exactly what they ruled out, and exactly why a large number of very experienced outdoorsmen in that province believe that Jim Barnes did not die of exposure and was not killed by any animal that biologists have a name for. Let me put you in the right part of the world first, because the geography here matters more than people realize. British Columbia is Canada's westernmost province. It is enormous. It holds 7 national parks, thousands of kilometers of logging road, mountain ranges that swallow aircraft, and river valleys where a helicopter can fly directly over a man and never see him. It is home to grizzly bears, black bears, cougars, wolves, moose, and caribou. It is also, without any competition, the most active Sasquatch region on the planet. The name Sasquatch itself comes from this province. It is an anglicized version of a word from the Halkomelem language of the Coast Salish peoples. More than 200 sightings have been logged around Harrison Hot Springs, Pitt Lake, Whistler, Squamish, Hope, Mission, and Vancouver Island alone, and the written record goes back further than most people assume. In 1864, a fur trader named Alexander Anderson reported that his party had been attacked by hairy humanoid figures who pelted them with heavy rocks from above. That is the crucial detail. Rocks, thrown, deliberately. Now, Chetwynd is not on the coast. It sits in the Peace River country in the northeast of the province, at the eastern edge of the Rocky Mountains. It is a working town. Forestry, oil and gas, hunting. This is not a place full of tourists chasing legends. These are people whose families have worked these bush roads for 3 generations. And in the hunting camps out there, the stories are consistent in a way that is genuinely unsettling. They talk about a bear that walks upright and does not move like a bear. They talk about camps being taken apart in the night, food gone, traps deliberately sprung and left, tents slashed, and not one track in the mud where tracks should be. They talk about knocking, wood on wood, out in the black, answered from a second direction by something else. And they talk about the doors. There are people in that region who will tell you, completely straight-faced, that something has come up to their houses at night and rapped on the door frame. Not the door, the frame. 3 knocks, in a rhythm that sounds almost human, almost polite. And when they open the door, the porch is empty, and the yard is silent, and every animal for half a kilometer has stopped making noise. That is why so many hunters up there will not go into the bush alone. They go in pairs, or at minimum they bring a dog. Jim Barnes brought a dog. So who was he? James Joseph Edmund Barnes went by Jim. He was 28 years old, 5'11", and about 200 pounds. Brown hair, brown eyes, and a large mustache that everyone who knew him mentions. He lived in Fort St. John and he worked as a paramedic. Think about what that job means for a second, because it matters enormously here. A paramedic is trained to stay calm inside chaos. He is trained in trauma response, in blood loss, in fractures, in hypothermia. He knows exactly what cold does to a human body, and exactly how long he has. This is not a weekend camper who panics when the sun goes down. This is a professional whose entire career is built on not panicking. He had also been hunting for years. He knew that country. His partner was Michaela Sawyer. She was a paramedic as well. Together they had a golden retriever named Murphy, a red-coated male, only about 18 months old at the time. Young, big, full of energy, treated like family, the way people treat a dog when the dog is the 3rd member of the household. On October 17th, Jim went out to the bush. According to Michaela, he had gone to collect firewood, taking the truck, the dog, and his firearms with him, because in that part of the country, you do not go into the trees without a rifle, even when you are only gathering wood. Police would later say he was believed to have been grouse hunting in the Chetwynd area. The truck was a gray 2004 Chevrolet Colorado, single cab British Columbia plate LJ1079. On the morning of October 18th, between 11 and 11:30, Jim Barnes was seen on Ground Birch Road, just off the 269 road, with his vehicle and with his dog. That is the last confirmed sighting of him by another human being. He was supposed to come home for a work shift. He did not. And at 10:58 that night, Michaela reported him missing to the Fort St. John detachment of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. 47 minutes past midnight, Chetwynd police were pulled in because the search had already shifted to their territory. Now here is the first thing that makes seasoned searchers uneasy. That is a fast report. Under 12 hours from last sighting to a missing person file. Most wilderness disappearances lose days before anyone even starts looking. Jim had the best possible head start that a missing man can have. It did not matter. The truck was found on the Ground Birch Forest Service Road, roughly 60 kilometers southwest of Fort St. John. And this is where the case stops behaving like a normal accident. The driver's side door was not properly closed. Inside, still sitting there, were his keys, his phone, his wallet, his backpack, and his firearms. Read that again, slowly. His rifle was in the truck. There is no version of a hunting accident where a man walks away from his vehicle in October in the Rocky Mountain foothills and leaves his weapon behind. That firearm is not decoration. In that country, it is the single most important thing you carry, because it is the only thing standing between you and a grizzly that is trying to put on weight before it dens up for winter. And the keys. A man does not lock up and wander off. A man who intends to walk any real distance takes his phone, if only for the map and the camera. Everything about the scene says the same thing. Jim Barnes was not planning to be away from that truck for long. He was in transition. He was either just arriving, or more likely, just about to leave. Mid-step, hands occupied. Guard down. Search and rescue was mobilized. Police dog services were deployed. Volunteers came in. They swept the roads, the cut blocks, the creek beds, the tree lines. Aircraft went up. They found nothing. Not a jacket, not a boot, not a shell casing. On October 25th, 1 week in, the formal search was suspended. And then, one day after it was called off, searchers reportedly spotted something along a riverbank, a frozen boot print, and beside it, a dog print. That report has never been fully expanded on publicly, and I want to be honest with you about that. But sit with the image for a moment anyway. A man and his dog moving together along a river, away from a truck that still contained every single thing a person needs to survive. Why would you do that? What makes a trained, armed, experienced paramedic abandon his rifle, abandon his phone, abandon his vehicle, and move on foot into freezing country with nothing but his dog beside him? There are only two honest answers. Either he was chasing something, or something was moving him. Now I have to tell you about a second man, because this is the part that destroys the simple explanation. At almost exactly the same time that Jim Barnes vanished, a 20-year-old named Sam Banastic was also missing in northeastern British Columbia. He had gone into Redfern-Keeley Provincial Park on October 7th for what was supposed to be a 10-day camping and fishing trip. He never came home. His family reported him missing. The two search operations ran in parallel, a few hundred kilometers apart. Same province, same month. Same brutal weather closing in. Search and rescue threw everything at it. Helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft, drones, around 120 trained volunteers, roughly 3,500 search hours across hundreds of square kilometers. Both searches were suspended. Both men were presumed lost. And then on November 26th, two workers driving out to service a natural gas site saw a figure on the road. He was walking with a stick in each hand to hold himself upright. He had cut up his own sleeping bag and wrapped the fabric around his legs. It was Sam Banastic, alive, after 50 days. 50 days, in country where the nights dropped below -20 degrees Celsius. He had sheltered in his car for a couple of days, then walked to a mountainside creek and camped there for 10 or 15 days, then moved further down into the valley and built a shelter in a dried-out creek bed. Frostbite, smoke inhalation, barely standing, but alive, and he walked out under his own power. Understand what that proves. It proves that a 20-year-old with almost no equipment, in that exact province, in that exact month, in that exact cold, can survive nearly 2 months and then reach a road on his own 2 feet. Now compare that to a 28-year-old professional paramedic, trained in cold injury, familiar with the terrain, who had a vehicle, a rifle, a phone, and a dog, and who was reported missing within 12 hours. Sam Banastic walked out. Jim Barnes has never been seen again. Whatever happened on the Ground Birch Forest Service Road, it was not simply the cold. The cold did not beat Sam. Something else took Jim. And then came November 28th. A call went out that an emaciated golden retriever had been found in the Halfway River area, near Fort St. John. Roughly 100 kilometers from where Jim Barnes disappeared, the dog was in horrifying condition, starving, its coat discolored and matted. It had come limping out of the bush, and by the accounts of those who saw it, it was days away from dying. The description matched Murphy. The story detonated across the province. Barnes's family and McCalla went to see the animal. They brought in other people who had known Murphy well, including the dog's own groomer. And every one of them looked at that dog and believed it was him. But nobody could be completely certain, and here is why. Murphy had no tattoo. Murphy had no microchip. There was no way to simply scan the animal and read a number. So think about what the family was carrying at that moment. If that really was Murphy, then that dog had survived roughly 6 weeks alone in the mountains in early winter and had covered around 100 kilometers of wilderness and had come back. And if the dog had come back, the dog had been somewhere, which meant the dog had come from somewhere, which meant there was a direction, a place, a reason. For the first time since October, it looked like there was a thread to pull. Police sent samples for DNA testing. On January 29, 2025, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police announced the result. The dog found in the Halfway River area was not Murphy, similar in appearance, similar breed, similar age and coloring, but genetically a completely different animal. I want you to feel the weight of that, because most people who covered this case got it wrong and then never corrected it. There are videos and articles still circulating today that talk about how Murphy came home, how Murphy was traumatized, how Murphy refuses to go back into the forest, how Murphy knows what happened out there. None of that is true. Murphy never came back. That golden retriever, 18 months old, red-coated, went into the bush with Jim Barnes on October 18, 2024, and has never been found. Not alive, not dead, not a collar, not a bone. And this is where the case becomes something other than a tragedy. Because now you are not asking what happened to one man, you are asking how a full-grown human being and a large, healthy dog both vanish from the same spot, on the same afternoon, within a few hundred meters of a vehicle, and leave behind absolutely nothing between them. Consider what should have happened. If wolves took them, there would be a kill site. Wolves do not tidy up. They scatter bone across a wide area, and they leave hair, and they leave stomach contents. Northern gray wolves generally weigh between 60 and 130 pounds and hunt in packs of roughly 5 to 10. A pack that takes down a grown man and a 70-pound retriever leaves a scene that search and rescue would find within a day. If a grizzly took them, it would cache the remains. Bears bury what they cannot finish, and they cover the cache with dirt and branches, and then bed down nearby to guard it. Police dogs are trained specifically for that. A cache is findable. If Jim had fallen, or become hypothermic, or been injured, the dog changes everything. Dogs do not leave. A golden retriever whose person goes down on the ground will stay with that person, and it will bark, and it will be found. That is the entire behavioral profile of the breed. And if Jim died and Murphy survived and ran, then Murphy should have surfaced somewhere, exactly the way that other golden retrievers surfaced at Halfway River. Every single natural explanation leaves evidence. This scene had none. 2 bodies, 1 truck, 0 trace. So let us talk about what the hunters up there actually think. Michaela had mentioned something in the aftermath that fits a pattern researchers have documented for decades. Jim had been hearing knocking, late at night, around the property. No rhythm to it that he could pin down, just sudden hard raps out of the silence. He would take a flashlight and a firearm and check the front, check the back, and find nothing. He would call out. Nothing ever answered. I want to be clear that I am relaying what has circulated in this community rather than a police finding. But wood knocking is one of the most consistently reported behaviors in the entire Sasquatch record. Researchers interpret it as long-distance signaling between individuals, the same way a wolf pack uses howls to stay coordinated across a valley. Two of them will knock and answer, and if you are standing between them, you will hear it come from both sides. The howls are the other signature, and British Columbia has produced some of the most disturbing audio anyone has ever recorded.
I heard some shit there.
Starting to regret that I stopped at this rest stop.
High-pitched screams that go on far too long. Deep guttural roars from ravines. There is a well-known recording associated with the Revelstoke region that circulated widely online, and in 2019 a family filming in the Canadian bush captured an eerie, sustained howl that cryptid researchers still argue about today. And then there is Todd Standing. Standing is probably the most polarizing Bigfoot researcher in Canada. He studied wildlife at the University of Alberta. He operates under the name Sylvanic, and he claims to have made repeated contact with a population living in the Rockies near the boundary of Banff and Kootenay. He put out a feature documentary called Discovering Bigfoot. He has taken television survival experts into the backcountry with him, and in 2017 he did something that no other researcher has done. He filed a civil lawsuit in the British Columbia Supreme Court against the provincial government, arguing dereliction of duty for refusing to acknowledge the species. He asked the court to order a government biologist into the field with him for 3 months so he could show them a Sasquatch directly. The province responded that the claim was groundless and lacked an air of reality. In September 2018, the court threw the lawsuit out. Now you can believe Todd Standing or you can dismiss him entirely, and plenty of people in the research community do dismiss him. That is a separate argument. But the reason his name keeps coming up in relation to this case is simple. The region he has spent his life insisting is occupied is the same mountain system that runs straight up into the country where Jim Barnes disappeared. There is one more account I want to give you, and this one is not from a researcher. It is from a man who camps alone. His name is Brandon Reynolds, 37 years old. For nearly 5 years he spent the majority of his life hiking and camping solo. He has gone months without speaking to another human being. He has taken every survival course available. He has walked most of the Appalachian Trail and spent long stretches in remote country across the United States and Canada. He describes himself as a man who knows sound. He can tell you whether a cougar is mating, fighting, or stalking. He knows foxes, bobcats, owls, and the call of every bird in his region. He knows what a moose sounds like moving through willow, and what an elk sounds like, and what a weasel sounds like. When you live out there permanently, you have to know these things, because sound is the only early warning system you get. He says there are 3 or 4 sounds he has heard in his life that he cannot account for. Sounds that do not belong to any animal in North America. He also says he has walked into things he cannot explain. Crude shelters, built out of branches, arranged in a way that no wind pattern produces. And inside them, animal remains that had been torn apart, but with the muscle and the organs left untouched. Not eaten, not cached, just opened up and abandoned. He describes it as something playing with its food rather than feeding. But the night he actually left the bush was in the Oregon mountains, with his closest friend, a man even more experienced than he is. They were sitting at the fire, sober, talking, when a deep guttural roar came out of a ravine roughly 300 yards away. It lasted for minutes. He says it was loud enough that he could feel it inside his skull. 2 grown men with decades of hunting experience between them, carrying rifles heavy enough to stop a bear well over 1,000 pounds, sat there and held on to each other and cried. Neither of them thought about fighting. Neither of them thought about defending the camp. The only thing either of them wanted was to be somewhere else. At first light they ran. They left the tent standing. So where does that leave Jim Barnes?